Why is nobody talking about the Michigan Wolverines? Most people would have Michigan in their top two when it comes to their respective polls, whether it's the AP poll or the coaches poll. I don't actually know exactly where they are in either of those polls, but you'd have to guess they're probably in the top two of the best teams in college football right now. If you have a case for them being the best team in college football right now, I don't have a strong case against that. I think that's kind of where you can see Michigan being, is that tier one spot. So it kind of becomes that conversation of, well, JD, people talk about Georgia. JD, people talk about Florida State. People talk about Ohio State. Like, why aren't we talking about Michigan right now? And if you're a Michigan fan, you maybe feel like, okay, that's fine, we'll fly under the radar. But there's also an element of probably like, hey, are we being disrespected right now? We made the college football playoff the last 2 years. We've run the Big Ten the last 2 years. Why are we not getting a little bit more buzz? Well, I think there's a reason for that. We'll talk about it. Before we do that, though, make sure you're subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel, College Football, every single day. The Hard Count is live 3 times a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Big Prediction Tuesday coming for you tomorrow on this channel, predicting all the big games for Week 7 of the college football season. Just sad that we're already talking about Week 7. Over halfway through the regular season. Hate that. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on Twitter, at JD Piquel, to stay up with everything that we got going on this very show. So why is nobody talking about Michigan right now? It's kind of funny to say, but like, what is there to talk about? You know, like what is the big talking point when it comes to Michigan right now? Have they played anybody that's super noteworthy? No. I think a subplot within that, have they made any of their games super noteworthy? Also no. I would focus more on the second part of that equation, because it's not unlike, you know, some of these college football powers to have a slower start to the season in terms of the opponents they play. I understand sometimes you get a big game week 1 and it's a primetime television game and all that, but like Georgia didn't play a crazy difficult schedule to start this season, but they're getting talked about. So why was Georgia getting talked about early in the year and not Michigan? Fair question, right? A couple pieces to that. The first is Georgia, we just didn't know quite as much about. Like Georgia, new OC, new quarterback. Michigan's got top 5 returning production in the country. Same quarterback is back. Also, Georgia had a little bit of some talking points when it came to them starting slow. Like there was a couple times where you're watching games on a Saturday and say, whoa, what's the score with Georgia UAB? And this is not a dunk on Georgia session. I think it's going to be Georgia and Michigan in the national title game. I've already said that before. But when it comes to why we're not talking about Michigan as much, it's because we don't have that much to unpack with them. Like we kind of understand what they are as a team. We feel like we know who they're going to be going forward. 84% of that production from last year is back on offense. 78% of that production from last year is back on defense. Like, what is there to break down? Michigan, we thought going into the year, was going to be dominant. Michigan, halfway through the season, extremely dominant. PJ Fleck said as much after Minnesota played Michigan. He's like, that's the best football team I've seen in 11 years. Like, okay, mic drop, period, the end. Like, I'm speechless even just talking about that. Like, Michigan in itself, we know right now, is in a lot of ways a proven commodity. And so it's a schedule piece to it, yes, but also Michigan's just taking care of business. Like when you're at your job and you do a great job on a project that you're supposed to do a great job on, you don't get talked about. In some ways, no news is good news. Yes, you would like a little bit of like, hey, thumbs up, good work. That's fair. It's fair to expect that. But if you don't get that, it's not necessarily something to write home about. It'd be unfortunate if it's like, hey, you're supposed to do a great job on this project and you just did a job. You did a 7 out of 10. When you get talked about, that's not necessarily a good thing. So what I'm saying is Michigan not being talked about is not a disrespect thing. I think it's honestly a respect thing to Michigan and saying, we know what you are. We don't need to try and talk it to death. Michigan is Michigan, and they're going to be Michigan probably in November, and we're going to talk about it a lot then because, like I said, in November, that's when Michigan is going to get a ton of airtime. Like the last 3 games, in my opinion, is their season. Yes, they have some games on the schedule before them that are noteworthy, but I'm telling you, at Penn State, at Maryland, and Ohio State to end the year, that 3-week stretch, that is their season. Like Michigan needs to be playing their best football at that point in time to accomplish all they want to accomplish. Even that Maryland game, it was already a little bit of a sneaky spot with the fact that it's between Penn State and Ohio State, kind of the perfect letdown / look ahead spot. I mean, we've seen what they can do offensively. We've seen Taulia Tagovailoa and what he has under the hood. So getting off track here, but the bottom line is Michigan will be talked about a lot in November. Let everybody else have the headlines in September. Let everybody else be talked about in October. Don't worry about Michigan not getting the headlines right now. That's a good thing. You want to read about Michigan on the third page of the newspaper where it's like, hey, Michigan rolls over Minnesota yet again. Awesome. Hey, Michigan scoring 40 a game. Awesome. Michigan, most points scored against them this season has been 10 from Minnesota this past week. Awesome. Let's keep on rolling here. Dominance doesn't make headlines necessarily. Dominance isn't necessarily something that's super fun to talk about. And people in this profession that sit behind a microphone, we talk about things that are up for debate. We talk about things that people are divided on. Nobody's divided on Michigan right now. Michigan has been the epitome of dominance. They have a ton back production-wise. We know who the quarterback is. We know who the head coach is. We know what the staff is. Like, there is no guessing with Michigan. For us, it's about what is Michigan going to be when it comes to November. And so I think that's the real challenge now for Michigan internally. There's not a ton of resistance for them until they get to November. Not really Michigan's fault. I promise they'll have it in 2024. We've already seen what they're going to have to play in the Big Ten when that whole deal resets and expands. And also, by the way, they play Texas. Like, another conversation for another time. But for this season, the challenge will be building that muscle without the resistance. Because we all understand this. Like, you build a muscle by breaking it down, by putting heavy weight on it, by making it do hard things, and then over the course of a couple of weeks, you check back on that muscle and you're stronger. You can do more weight. You're improved. For Michigan, they're not going to have that same resistance until November, until it's time to be strong. So what it's going to come down to for Michigan is that internal standard being the resistance, beating the heck out of each other during the week at practice, having the standard way up here, even when you're playing Rutgers, even when you're playing ECU, having the standard be at championship level. Doesn't matter if we're not playing Ohio State this week. Because for us, whenever we play Ohio State, we've been practicing like that all year long. All 12 of these weeks, we've been playing the same way. We've been practicing the same way, same amount of intensity. It can't be a thing where you turn the dial up when it comes to November. That dial's got to be cranked, got to be ready to roll. And then when it comes time to play those teams like Penn State, like Ohio State, that letdown spot against Maryland, at that point in time, you'll see the fruits of your labor. Then you'll see the dividends. Then you'll be able to look back and say, hey, we didn't have the same runway as everyone else, but we made sure that internally we kept the heat on. We kept the resistance internally at a certain level to where now, when it's time to play championship football, we've been practicing at a championship level in Ann Arbor for the entirety of this season. So the bottom line here for Michigan, are they being talked about as much as some of these other teams in the top 10? No. But it's because there's not a ton to unpack with Michigan. But I promise you, come November, it'll be a lot of Michigan talk from a lot of different outlets. I'll say this too. This show right here, we're not going to overlook Michigan. We're done doing that. The first half of the season, there wasn't a ton to unpack. There's more to unpack here the next couple of weeks. And if everybody else isn't going to talk about it, we'll talk about it. All right, so make sure you're subscribed here. College football, only college football. And when it's time for Michigan to start playing some big games in November, that'll be the real test. And that'll be the time where everybody else gets it on the party. And we'll go from there. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We're live tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.